I caught my girlfriend with my best friend, and my world fell apart. One night changed everything. Friendship, trust, and love were shattered. A story you'll never forget. I caught my girlfriend with my best friend, and my world fell apart. One night changed everything. Friendship, trust, and love were shattered. A story you'll never forget. My best friend suddenly attacked me and tried to cause serious harm because he had feelings for my girlfriend, with whom I'd been in a relationship for 5 years. I'm 27, and Mark is 26. We became best friends when we were 16, bonded by a shared ambition for the same career. After years of struggle and countless rejections, my career finally started taking off over the past year, while Mark's wasn't going as well. I spent a lot of time trying to help him, especially in the last year, doing my best to support and inspire him. We even lived as neighbors in the same apartment from ages 20 to 23, sharing pretty much everything. But about 6 months ago, his attitude toward me changed drastically. He started making snide remarks, saying humiliating things. I tried to brush off these little jabs, chalking it up to his envy and struggles, attempting to understand his position. I knew our field is a tough environment, full of rejection, and seeing a friend suddenly achieve the success you've always dreamed of isn't easy. I had a girlfriend, Emily, who's 26. I thought we had a perfect relationship, 5.5 years together, great communication, amazing intimacy. She supported me through all those tough years, as I carved out my path in the professional world. I always shared everything with her. We had no secrets, and as far as I thought, we were completely honest with each other. I worked hard to keep our relationship fresh and exciting. Dates once or twice a week, surprises, gifts, trips, joint activities like cooking and dance classes. I loved spending time with her, got into her hobbies, and did everything to let her know she was my number one. It felt like she felt the same. Even when my career took off, I never put her or my friends on the back burner. For me, happiness requires a balance between work and personal life. Last week, we were at our friend's place, Tom and Katie's, both 27. They'd recently bought a house, and we were hanging out in their backyard, having drinks with Bill, 26, and Jane, 27. We've been friends for 7 years. While we chatted, Mark got drunk fast and spent the whole evening throwing jabs at me. After 6 months of this behavior, I'd had enough. The others told him to tone it down too, since he was trying to disguise his comments as jokes, but in reality, he was being rude and offensive. But closer to midnight, a little drunk myself, I couldn't take it anymore. I told Mark everything I thought, and it turned into an argument. I think it all stemmed from his jealousy of my success. I told Mark it wasn't my fault, he didn't have the talent to make it, and I brought up everything I'd done to help him. That's when he attacked me. We shoved each other a bit, he managed to knock me down, kicked me in the ribs a couple of times, and then tried to stomp on my head. Luckily, he didn't hit me full force, but the sole of his boot grazed my cheek, leaving a mark. Still, it was enough for my cheek to stay swollen, even now. He tried it again, but I dodged and his heel slammed down with massive force just a few inches from my face. If he'd hit my head, he could have cracked my skull or killed me. That's when the other guy stepped in. I got up and yelled that he'd lost his mind. Mark seemed to be leaving, but then he grabbed a wooden board. Tom and Katie were redoing their fence and building a shed in the yard, and came at me again, aiming for my head. I ducked and raised my arm, and he hit my elbow hard. Again, he could have killed me. In a split second, he nearly clipped Jane as he swung, and everything spiraled out of control. Tom and Bill tackled him, and beat him up pretty bad in a fit of rage. The girls managed to pull them off Mark. Realizing what had just happened, we were all thrown into emotional chaos. Mark sat down, and Emily sat next to him. His face was bloody, but he was conscious. Katie drove Mark to the hospital, and didn't get back until morning. He had a broken nose and a mild concussion. After the doctors patched him up, she took him to his parents' place. According to her, Mark barely spoke to her, didn't explain himself, and didn't even apologize. None of us slept that night, and honestly, after all that stress, everything felt blurry to me. Probably from the mix of alcohol, shock, and adrenaline, but then things got even worse. You probably noticed I hadn't mentioned Emily for a while. We were sitting around, and Tom said something like, "Mark deserved worse than a broken nose for trying to kill you twice, and almost hurting Jane." Emily, who'd been quiet until then, suddenly snapped and started defending Mark, saying he didn't deserve all this, and that he was just going through a tough time. Tom and Emily nearly got into a full-blown argument, after which she stormed out of the room. I followed her, thinking, okay, we're all in shock and sleep-deprived, and tried to comfort her. I found her in the guest room crying. I said I understood we'd all been through a shock, and maybe we should try to get some sleep. She didn't even look at me, and that's when it hit me. Mark and Emily had been sitting next to each other that night, and it wasn't the first time he'd yelled at me. Emily was right there with him, pulling his arm, begging him to go for a walk with her, and calm down, focused on him, not me after Mark had kicked me, tried to stomp on my head, and swung a board. While I was lying there in pain, she didn't even check on me. When the guys were beating Mark, she was screaming hysterically, trying to pull them off him. I don't remember her asking once if I was okay. I asked her straight up, "Are you cheating on me with Mark?" She broke down crying, repeating that she never wanted things to go this far. That was my answer. I lost it, started yelling at her, asking what was going on and how she could do this. The others came in, and the guys took me to another room to calm me down, while Jane and Katie drove Emily to her parents' place. Jane stayed with her because they were worried about her stay. The whole car ride, Emily cried so hard she couldn't speak. When they got to her parents', Jane and Emily's dad helped her up the stairs and into bed. She could barely stand. She was so hysterical. The only thing she managed to scream, according to them, was that she'd ruined everything. Jane stayed with her because her parents were horrified. They'd never seen her like this. Jane and Katie told them what happened between Mark and me, and it all seemed tied to some kind of affair between Mark and Emily. It's been 5 days. I'm still in physical and emotional pain, feeling so much anger and confusion. I've got a fractured elbow, a couple of bruised ribs, and the right side of my face is swollen. That night keeps replaying in my head. I sent Emily a few messages asking for an explanation, but she didn't reply. This morning, her mom called me. Honestly, her parents are amazing people, always kind to me and so helpful over the years. She apologized profusely for her daughter and was really understanding. Then she said Emily wanted to meet and talk and asked if I could come over. I agreed. When I got there, they said they'd wait outside in the car to give us space, but because of Emily's condition, they didn't want to go far. I walked into the house, and seeing Emily hit me with a storm of emotions, anger, bitterness, then pity. I just wanted to hug her. She looked awful, like she hadn't eaten, showered, or slept since that night. It hurt so much to see her like that. I could barely stop myself from going over and holding her. Instead, I just sat across from her. She said I could ask anything, and she'd be honest. Then kept repeating how sorry she was, and that she'd ruined everyone's lives. I won't go into too much detail to keep it short, but basically, a year ago, Mark confessed his love to her and had been persistent ever since. She said she made it clear the feelings weren't mutual. I asked why she didn't tell me, and she said she didn't want to ruin our friendship and hoped to sort it out. In recent months, he'd gotten more aggressive, asking her to leave me for him. I asked if anything happened between them. She admitted they kissed twice, both times initiated by Mark, but she stopped him. Once they were watching a movie together and cuddling. Mark tried to take it further, but she left and set clear boundaries. I asked why she kept meeting him alone, if he was constantly trying to kiss her and push for intimacy. She said he promised every time he wouldn't do it again. I asked why she didn't cut off contact, why she kept replying to his messages, meeting him, giving him false hope. Maybe she just liked his attention. Then she said something weird, that she felt sorry for him, felt responsible for him like an older sister. What the heck? And wanted to help him through a tough time. She even tried setting him up with a friend, but he ruined it with his awful behavior. I asked if she was really so naive that she didn't see how her actions fueled his hopes and feelings. She cried harder, insisting they had a sibling-like bond, that she just wanted to fix things, that Mark was struggling, and she was trying to help him get back on his feet. But he got more persistent and started bad-mouthing me, saying I didn't deserve her. She said she regretted everything, called herself stupid, and added that she'd ruined it all in the worst way possible, but she'd acted with good intentions, not realizing she was making it worse. Then I asked if she'd contacted him after that night. She paused awkwardly, then sobbed even harder and admitted she had. That completely crushed me. This guy had spent years chasing her, tried to kill me, and I'd waited 5 days for her to respond, only to find out she'd been talking to him. I couldn't say anything. I just wanted to hurt her, not physically, but emotionally. So I decided to get up and leave. She begged me to stay, offered to show me the messages, swore she just wanted to check on him, and then told him it was over, and to leave her alone. But to me, she'd already made her choice. While I was going through the worst moment of my life, she still chose to talk to him. I walked out, and Emily followed me. I'm not proud of this, but her mom and dad got out of the car and asked if everything was okay. That's when I lost it. I yelled, with some swearing, that their daughter had ruined my life. How could she choose the guy who tried to bash my head in over me? I was so angry I couldn't even drive, so I just walked away. I don't know how long I walked, but Emily's dad pulled up and told me to get in the car. I did, expecting him to yell at me or judge me, but bless his heart, he just drove me home. We didn't talk the whole way, but when he stopped at my place, he put his hand on my shoulder. I couldn't even look him in the eye after everything I'd said. Emily sent me screenshots of her texts with Mark, which seemed to back up her story. She just asked how he was, then said she couldn't keep in touch anymore. She also added that she'd never forgive him for attacking me. She sent other screenshots of past conversations, mostly her asking him to stop, saying she had no feelings for him, rejecting his advances. But since they'd been talking for over a year, she could have picked the parts that make her look good, and left out the rest. I haven't replied, and don't plan to. I want to block her, but for some reason, I can't yet. I feel betrayed, angry, and like a terrible person. I want to hurt Emily and Mark, make them feel the pain I'm feeling. I know these are unhealthy emotions. I hope that by writing this online, even if no one reads it, I can start sorting out what happened, how my life went from near perfect to feeling like I'll never be happy again. It feels like this pain will never go away. How do you even deal with this? I feel like I've lost everything. The people I loved with all my heart now just fill me with hate. I know Emily said she didn't cheat in the physical sense, which I doubt, because I'm not an idiot. Even if there was no intimacy, she still betrayed me, just like Mark did. I don't think I'll ever forgive them. I can't imagine ever reaching a point where I'd even consider trying. So if any of you have dealt with betrayal from a partner, a friend, or both, what do I do next? Where do I start to stop obsessing over this and try to live my life again? Update, I need your advice again. What do I do next? Many of you asked for an update on the whole story, and I'll try to share it without diving too deep into details, to keep it short. The main question I need advice on is at the end. Mark, a lot of you said I should file a police report. I don't know, maybe it's because many of you are American and trust the justice system too much, or watch too many legal shows. It doesn't work like that here. I consulted 2 lawyers and the takeaway is this. I can file a report, but the chances of Mark going to jail are slim to none. The most likely outcome is he'd have to pay court fees and compensation, maybe a big amount, maybe small, since I didn't suffer severe injuries. My friends could back up his attack, but a judge would likely rule based on actual damage. He might get probation, but no prison time. So yeah, I could ruin him financially, but he could countersue Tom and Bill. They'd face worse odds since they broke his nose and gave him a concussion. A lawsuit could drag on for months, if not years, and I just want this over. Mark's reputation's already taken a hit. He's lost some friends, others stayed neutral. His older brother said he and their parents were disappointed in Mark, but that's it. His younger sister took it hard though. She used to joke that I was like her big brother and admired Emily, so she's cut Mark off. He sent me a long apology letter, but didn't mention Emily once, just his behavior toward me in the attack. It felt sincere. He owned up to a lot, but blamed some of it on mental health issues. I haven't replied and don't plan to. Jane and Katie, some of you thought Jane and Katie knew more than they let on, or were siding with Emily, so I played it cool and asked if they'd seen any red flags with Mark and Emily. And yeah, they knew he'd kissed her, but they claimed they didn't know the full extent. They said they only knew that Mark and Emily were spending time together, and Emily told them he kissed her but assured them she'd handled it. I didn't really buy that. That's all they knew, especially after Jane got super defensive when I pressed her with more questions. It set off a chain reaction. Tom got mad at her for hiding it, and started suspecting she was keeping more under wraps. It's caused tension in their relationship. I'm trying not to get involved, but I told Tom not to be mad at her over me. Katie came to my place on her own to talk. She said she genuinely didn't know much, just overheard a conversation about Mark and Emily later on. When she asked Jane about it, Jane said Emily had sorted it out. Katie swears she assumed Emily had told me everything and didn't know more. I believe her, she seemed sincere and apologetic. Unlike Jane, I don't hate Jane or feel angry at her, but I'm disappointed in how she acted. So I've stopped talking to her for the past few weeks, because I just don't feel the need. It's slightly affected my friendship with Tom since I've been hanging out with other people instead. Emily, where do I start? A lot of you advised me to cut off all contact with her, but I know myself, I'd go crazy if I couldn't vent and figure out what happened. Someone told me they deal with issues face to face, and that approach resonates with me more than a total cutoff. Though I did plan to stop contact after our last meeting. I also needed to apologize to Emily's parents and pick up my car parked near their house. So 4 days after that incident, I called them and asked if I could come over to talk to them and see Emily. They were even glad, seemed like they thought I might be planning to forgive her or something. I showed up, we talked, I apologized. They said they were disappointed and shocked that I'd yelled at them and said hurtful things, but they understood I was overwhelmed and in a bad place. We hugged, then they stepped outside again, leaving me in the living room where Emily was waiting. She came up to me with the saddest look I'd ever seen and asked for a hug. I refused and asked her to sit and talk. I told her to go over everything again and asked if Mark had been abusive in some way, like Jane and Katie hinted. She repeated what she'd said before, but added a few details. She said she didn't fully grasp the situation back then, felt like it was all her responsibility, but the reason she couldn't tell me was Mark. He threatened to tell me himself, that they'd kissed, that they were in love, that she was cheating. When she tried to cut him off, he'd say he'd do it, and it'd ruin our relationship and my friendship with him. He insisted I'd believe him over her. She felt trapped, forced to handle it alone. I asked if he'd ever been physically harsh with her. She hesitated and said not exactly, but twice he'd hurt her. Once at an event we were all at, he pulled her aside, asked if she really didn't love him, and when she said no and tried to leave, he grabbed her wrist, wouldn't let go, and pulled her closer, causing pain. I remembered that night midway through. Emily got quiet and distracted but told me she was just tired. The second time was similar, but they were alone and he squeezed her bicep so hard it left bruises. I don't recall seeing bruises on her. I'd have noticed and asked. Maybe she hid them. I also asked if they'd really never been intimate. His intentions were obvious, so why did she keep putting herself in that position? She just said she didn't know, that she was stupid, but there was never intimacy. I asked why he had such power over her that she couldn't find the strength to tell me for a whole year, why she believed I'd trust him over her. She said again she didn't know, that she just kept making mistakes. I asked why she ignored me after Mark attacked me but kept talking to him. She cried and kept saying she didn't know. She thought our relationship was strong enough to survive it, and was more worried about what Mark might do. I told her that's what hurt me the most. She cared more about him than me. To me, that meant she chose him. She exploded, saying she didn't choose him, but I stood firm. It sure looked that way to me. Then I explained how much they'd both hurt me, that all trust was gone, and our relationship was over. I said I wouldn't contact them anymore. She asked if there'd ever be a time in the future when we could be part of each other's lives. I said no, but something kept nagging at me. Her story still had too many shaky parts, so I reached out to Sarah, Emily's best friend, and told her I was completely broken, felt like no one around me was telling the truth, and begged her to be honest. To my surprise, she replied. Turns out she knew a lot, but Emily kept her in the dark about plenty too. She knew about Mark, said she'd told Emily to stop talking to him, and tell me about his behavior. She knew about the kisses and said Emily regretted it, and stopped things before they went further. Sarah explained that early on, Emily felt needed. She liked the dynamic in our relationship when I relied on her support, especially when work wasn't going well and I faced rejections. Not that I was always crying on her shoulder or living off her money, but often she was my rock, cheering me up, hugging me, motivating me, making me believe in myself and keep going. When my career took off, that dynamic faded. Then Mark stepped into the same spot I'd been in, letting Emily feel needed and valued again. I was stunned. Sarah said she was floored too when she figured it out. I asked if Emily felt needed because Mark wanted her. Sarah said Emily never said that, but knowing her for 20 years, she suspected it played a role. Then I asked the question I dreaded most. Maybe I was naive, thinking I was a good guy. Maybe Emily badmouthed me and I pushed her toward Mark. Sarah said not really. Emily always said she loved me, often gushed about how happy she was, and how I made her feel special. Sometimes Sarah almost envied her, though in rare moments, Emily mentioned I could be overly controlling, clingy or shut down and act selfishly, but nothing worse than that. Since then, I've noticed Sarah showing interest in me. She texts me daily, first asking how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, then sending memes, then memes with a slight flirty edge. But I'm not interested in her at all. so I think I'll have to shut it down so she doesn't think I'm encouraging her. A week ago, I got a message from Emily. I'd blocked her on all apps and social media. We always use those to chat, but rarely phone numbers. Maybe I forgot about her number, or subconsciously didn't block it. She wrote, "How are you?" Then said she'd smiled and laughed for the first time in ages because of me. She attached a photo of me on her TV, saying how proud she was of me and excited for my career growth. I work in the entertainment industry. My big break came last year when I was working behind the scenes, then started appearing on camera. I'm not a star by any means, but this little show is slowly gaining traction. I made a mistake and replied. We texted for 2 days, not about us, but about the political situation in the country. I kept my distance. If she wrote, I only replied when I had time or felt like it. Then she asked again if I'd ever let her be part of my life, even in some small way, in the future. I said I needed more time, but it's unlikely. Added that I couldn't keep talking to her for my mental health. Said goodbye and blocked her. When I thought it was over last Friday around midnight, there was a knock at my door. Emily was standing there, soaked to the bone in the rain, like something out of a movie. I asked what the heck she was doing here. She said she'd been at a bar drinking and wanted to see me but chickened out after getting out of the taxi. She stood outside for 10 minutes, but it got too cold to wait for another ride. I let her in, gave her some old sweatpants, a t-shirt and a hoodie, and put her wet clothes in a bag. She said her friends insisted she join them for a bachelorette party, though she didn't feel ready but went anyway. They were drinking, and she ordered her favorite cocktail from when we were together but apart. We used to text all night, funny stories, joking about what was happening, sending pics of our drinks. We were that couple always on our phones, chatting with each other. She instinctively reached for her phone to send me a pic, then realized she'd never be able to again, and felt a wave of sadness. She drank more, and though she told her friends she wasn't up for meeting guys, they invited some anyway. One was told Emily was single, and he started flirting, trying to get her attention. Her friends kept setting up moments to leave them alone, and she couldn't take it. She also said the guy was boring, uninteresting, pathetic, and unattractive. Emily rarely talks about people like that, and I realized she was somewhere between tipsy and moderately drunk. Normally, she's fun and chatty then, but this time, she was cold and detached, never once looking me in the eye. Unlike our last meeting, when her gaze was full of regret and sadness. She even spoke almost monotone, something I'd never seen before. It was a different Emily. I was tired and confused. My brain just shut off. She sat there silently. I opened a taxi app to get her a ride, but after 15 minutes it still couldn't find one. So I thought, screw it, and offered to drive her home because leaving her at my place didn't feel right. I suspected that was her plan, but I wanted to call her bluff. She just grabbed her stuff and walked to my car without arguing or explaining. In the car, the vibe was just as detached. Emily asked to pick the music. I said sure. Then she asked if she could hold my hand one last time. Fool that I am. I said yes. She just sat there staring out the window, never looking at me. Her behavior threw me off, and trying to lighten the mood, I awkwardly joked I could take her back to her friends. Maybe Mr. Pathetic was still there. She shrugged and said she was done with men forever, that they just betray her trust, manipulate her emotions and kindness, and put her in impossible situations. I didn't know if that was aimed at me, Mark, or both. I asked why she felt that way, and she shrugged again and said, seriously. She also mentioned Mark sent her a letter suggesting they move to another country together, but she threw it out, then we drove in silence. When we got to her parents' place, I felt her squeeze my hand like she didn't want to let go. When I stopped, she didn't say a word, just got out without looking at me and went inside. When I got home, I found her underwear in the bathroom, not in the laundry basket, but next to it where clothes often fall. Common sense says she left it there on purpose. She knows stuff lands there sometimes. Now it's another thing I'm overthinking, adding more doubts. I've got her underwear, and she's got my clothes, a perfect excuse to see each other again. I was totally thrown off and a bit freaked out by Emily's state that night. Even wondered if she was on something, she was that unlike herself. I considered asking Sarah about it but decided not to put her in that spot, so she wouldn't get dragged into this mess like me. I was so naive I unblocked Emily everywhere, because I genuinely believed she'd text me an apology for showing up drunk. The old Emily definitely would've. I also noticed she's drastically changed her Instagram, removed her bio, deleted almost all her photos. It used to be cute and quirky, now there are just two old pics. All the ones with other people and nearly all with me are gone, except one from a trip 2 years ago. We both called that vacation the most fun time of our lives. I thought I was starting to move forward, but now I can't stop thinking about her again. The truth is, I really miss Emily, a lot. She's truly a unique person. I always knew how lucky I was to have her in my life. And despite hating her and resenting her all month, seeing her Friday and remembering her crying at her parents' place made me realize I hate seeing her like this. I used to think her suffering would satisfy me, now I'm more worried about her than angry. I'll admit, when Emily squeezed my hand in the car, I felt butterflies, recalling our happy times, then felt anxious. I don't want her to destroy herself, or live with guilt forever. We're all human, we make mistakes. I'm inclined to believe Mark was abusive, which even makes me consider suing him to punish him for what he did to Emily, making her feel trapped by his threats and fear of losing everything. But then when things got heated, she comforted him, not me. I keep going over it. Her visit Friday feels a little manipulative, showing up soaked, leaving her underwear, acting so strange. But sometimes for a few minutes, I don't care, and I just want Emily back in my life as my girlfriend. I'm lost. Should I cut contact, be strong, and move on? Or reach out, talk honestly, try to work on things and see if we have a shot? Or rise above it, meet her to end it for good, while easing her guilt a bit, so she doesn't ruin herself, even if it means lying, or downplaying how she hurt me. As you can see, I'm totally lost and confused. I hope, like last time, someone comes with advice to help me figure out what to do right. Well, that's where the story cuts off. I get that you'd want to hear the rest, how it ends, but unfortunately that's it for now. Looks like the author figured some things out for himself, and didn't feel the need to post more updates. Please write in the comments what you think of this whole story. For me, it's super unclear. I can't tell for sure if she cheated or not, but I lean toward thinking she did. Still, I don't know if I'd go back to her if I were the author. I think he did go back though. Why? Because he started praising her, and that's what we usually do when we like a girl and hormones make us act all starry-eyed. It's hard to judge things objectively then, but logically it'd probably be smarter to break up with her. What a messy story. Seriously, why was she defending Mark instead of him? Okay, fine. She defended Mark, but at the end, she could have at least checked on her boyfriend's health. So yeah, it's a really murky situation. He could have asked Mark what really happened, gotten his side. But would he tell the truth? He might have said out of spite, "Yeah, we were great, she cheated on you with me all the time." What would that achieve? Just more confusion. On the other hand, maybe he'd have proof, which could have helped clear things up. Anyway, definitely share your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with me? Also check out our last video. You'll see it right here. Good luck.